Ever feel like you're just drowning in to-dos, you know?
Yeah.
Like at work, but not really getting anywhere meaningful.
Oh, yeah.
Today's deep dive is all about tackling that feeling head on.
Right.
We're going to be exploring why we might not be thinking as effectively as we could be in our workplaces, especially with that, constant pressure to be doing something all the time.
All the time, right?
To guide us through this, we've got Olga Fedoseva's article.
Okay.
This is UnitiQ, the best fractional HR and talent acquisition service company. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. It is important for us together with the YouTube algorithms.
The thinking crisis in organizations.
Interesting.
Now, Fedoseva isn't just talking about, the need to slow down.
Right.
She's making a case for a total cultural shift in how we work.
Yeah, I can see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And she really challenges this idea that constant activity equals productivity.
Yeah.
This autopilot mode, as she calls it, is actually hurting organizations in the long run.
It's a common trap we fall into, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So imagine this. You're facing a challenge at work, right? Do you carefully analyze the situation and explore all the possible solutions? Or do you just grab the most familiar solution?
Yeah.
Because it's easier even if it might not be the best fit.
Yeah, you go for what you know, right?
Exactly. And Fedoseva argues that we often default to that second option.
Right.
And you can probably see how that leads to less than ideal outcome.
Less than ideal, for sure. Think about all the wasted resources.
Oh, totally.
The poor decisions, and then the extra work everyone ends up doing to fix things later.
Ugh, it's the worst.
All because we didn't stop to really think at the start.
Okay, so we're often stuck on autopilot.
Right.
When we need to be engaging in deep thinking.
Deep thinking, yeah.
But why is it so hard to break free from that cycle?
Yeah, why is that?
What's holding us back?
Well, according to Fedoseva, one of the first major hurdles is just the lack of dedicated time for thinking.
Okay.
Most organizations, they just don't build it into the workflow.
It's true.
It's a pretty striking observation. Thinking isn't integrated into the workflow, she writes.
Wow.
And it makes you wonder, when was the last time you had a solid chunk of time at work just to think?
I know, I can't remember.
Right.
And when you're constantly under pressure to produce,
Yeah.
I can see how taking time to just think can feel almost impossible.
It's true, and that time crunch that forces us to rely on that autopilot decision-making. Choosing the first solution that pops into our heads, we prioritize doing overthinking, and it becomes a vicious cycle.
Oh, for sure.
We're always reacting to problems instead of preventing them through thoughtful analysis.
And this brings us to another interesting point that Fedoseva raises, meetings.
Oh, yeah.
They're often seen as the place where thinking happens, but she argues that's actually a myth.
That's right. Fedoseva boldly states, meetings are not a substitute for thinking.
Interesting.
And, I have to agree.
Yeah.
So often meetings become more about information sharing and going through the motions, rather than generating new ideas or truly solving problems.
Right.
We're so focused on getting things done
Yeah.
that we don't create the space for actual deep thinking.
So we're stuck in the cycle of busyness,
Right.
mistaking meetings for thinking,
Yeah,
and ultimately not addressing the root causes of our problems.
exactly.
But what are the real consequences of not thinking deeply at work? I mean, it sounds bad,
Yeah,
but is it really that detrimental to organizations?
it absolutely can be. Fedoseva points out some tangible negative impacts.
Okay.
For example, she argues that a lack of deep thinking stifles innovation.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. If you're not taking the time to really analyze a situation, how can you come up with truly creative and effective solutions?
That makes sense. If we're just reacting and going with the first thing that comes to mind, we're likely to miss out on those aha moments that lead to real breakthroughs.
Right. And this lack of deep thinking doesn't just impact the quality of our work. It also impacts us personally.
Okay.
Fedoseva argues it leads to increased workload and burnout. We're constantly having to redo work or correct poor decisions. And that creates a cycle of frustration and exhaustion.
It's like we're always putting out fires instead of actually building something meaningful.
Exactly.
And that definitely takes a toll on our energy and motivation.
For sure.
So we've painted a pretty bleak picture so far.
Right.
We're stuck on autopilot.
Yep.
Meetings aren't helping.
Yeah.
And it's leading to less innovation and more burnout. But thankfully, Fedoseva doesn't leave us hanging.
That's good.
She actually offers some concrete solutions
Oh, great.
for creating a thinking culture in our organizations.
Yes, and these solutions can be applied at both the individual and organizational level, which I think is really empowering.
So if we want to, break free from this autopilot cycle and embrace deeper thinking at work, where do we even begin?
That's a good question.
The solutions that Feta outlines in her article, they might sound radical, but they're definitely worth exploring. One of the most thought-provoking ideas that she proposes is what she calls the 20% rule.
20% rule, okay.
Essentially, she suggests dedicating 20% of your work time to thinking and planning.
20%?
Yeah.
That's a significant chunk of time. I imagine many people would balk at that idea, taking that much time away from their to-do lists.
Yeah, I can see why it might seem daunting. But think about it this way.
Okay.
Imagine having one full day each week dedicated to thinking, analyzing, strategizing.
Yeah.
How much more effective could you be in the other 4 days if you had that dedicated time to really think through your approach?
That's a really compelling way to frame it.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing it as lost time, it's an investment in working smarter, not harder.
Absolutely. But let's be practical. For people who feel like they can't even spare 5 minutes, let alone 20% of their work week, where do they start?
It's all about starting small and building from there. Even just blocking out 30 minutes each morning for focused reflection can make a huge difference. Treat it like an important meeting with yourself.
Yeah.
Find a quiet space, close your laptop, put your phone on silent, and just allow yourself to think.
That sounds so simple, yet so difficult in our current work culture.
I know.
Do you have any tips for how to actually make that happen?
It's about being intentional and creating boundaries.
Okay.
Maybe you need to arrive at work a bit earlier or block out that time on your calendar so you're not tempted to schedule over it.
Right.
It might feel awkward at first, especially if you're used to constant activity.
Yeah.
But trust me, the benefits are worth the effort.
Okay, so we've carved out some time for thinking, but meetings are still a big part of most people's work lives.
Right.
And we talked earlier about how they can actually be a barrier to deep thinking.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do we change that?
Well, Fedosieva suggests being really strategic about meetings. Start by asking yourself, what specific outcome do I want to achieve with this meeting? And is a meeting even necessary?
Sometimes a quick email or phone call might be more efficient than a 30-minute meeting.
Exactly. And if a meeting is necessary,
make
sure there's a clear agenda shared with participants well in advance.
Okay.
This allows everyone to come prepared with their thoughts and ideas, which makes for a much more productive discussion.
It also helps to avoid those meetings where everyone's just trying to figure out what the meeting's actually about.
Exactly. So we're being more intentional about when we have meetings and what we discuss in them.
Right. But once we're in the meeting, how do we create that space for deeper thinking?
It's about shifting the focus from information sharing to problem solving and idea generation.
Got it.
Encourage active listening. Ask probing questions. And resist the urge to jump to conclusions or solutions too quickly.
Okay.
The goal is to really dig into the issue at hand and explore all angles.
And don't be afraid to push back on ideas, even if they're coming from someone more senior.
Oh, absolutely.
That's how you get to the best solutions.
A healthy debate where everyone feels comfortable sharing their perspectives is essential for deep thinking. And this is something you can do even if you're not the one leading the meeting.
Okay.
Come prepared with thoughtful questions, challenge assumptions, and be willing to offer alternative viewpoints.
Even if you're just a participant, you can help shift the dynamic of the meeting.
Absolutely.
Towards a more thoughtful and productive discussion.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of taking good notes during meetings.
That's so true.
Jot down not just the action items, but also your own thoughts, questions, and insights as they come up.
Okay.
It'll help you process the information and make connections that you might have missed otherwise.
Taking good notes is like having a conversation with yourself during the meeting.
Yeah.
Which helps you engage more deeply with the material.
Exactly.
But thinking deeply isn't just about scheduling time or improving meetings. Right. It's also about actively developing critical thinking skills. It's not enough to just clear our schedules and show up to those meetings with good intentions,
Right.
We need to actually equip ourselves with the tools to think effectively.
You're absolutely right.
Right.
Fedosieva is a big advocate for training and skill development when it comes to critical thinking.
Okay.
It's about moving beyond just wanting to think deeply and actually building the capacity to do so.
So let's break that down. What does it even mean to be a critical thinker in the context of our work?
Well, at its core, critical thinking is about analyzing information objectively.
Okay.
It's about questioning assumptions, evaluating evidence,
Yeah.
and not just accepting things at face value.
It's like being a detective
Right.
in your own work.
Exactly.
Looking for clues, connecting the dots,
Uh-huh.
not settling for those easy answers.
And thankfully, there are some practical techniques that we can all use to sharpen our critical thinking skills.
Okay, give us the good stuff. What are some tools that we can start using today to become better critical thinkers?
One technique I find really helpful is the 5 whys method.
5 whys, okay.
It's incredibly simple,
Okay.
but so effective.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
When you're faced with a problem or a decision,
Mm-hmm.
just ask yourself why. 5 times in a row.
Okay.
Each time you ask why,
Yeah.
you dig a little deeper, peeling back the layers of the problem to get to that root cause.
So it's about not just treating the symptoms,
Right.
but actually getting to like the heart of the issue.
Exactly.
Yep.
And once you've identified that root cause,
Yeah.
you're in a much better position to find a real solution
Okay.
rather than just quick fix.
That's brilliant. I'm definitely going to start using the 5 whys. Are there any other techniques you recommend?
Another valuable tool is something you've probably heard of, SWOT analysis.
Right. SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I remember learning about that in school, but I haven't really used it in my work.
It's a classic for a reason.
Yeah.
It's a simple but powerful framework for evaluating a situation from multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
By looking at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats related to a decision or a project, you get a much clearer picture of the potential impact.
So it forces you to think about the potential downsides and challenges,
Right.
not just the positive aspects.
Exactly. Which ultimately leads to more informed and strategic decision-making.
These are such helpful tools. It's amazing how a simple framework or a series of whys can completely change how we approach a problem.
Absolutely. And the most important thing to remember is that developing critical thinking skills is an ongoing process.
Right.
It's not a one-time workshop or a checklist you can tick off. It's about cultivating a mindset of continuous learning and intellectual curiosity.
So to bring it all back to Feta's article and what we discussed today,
Yeah,
it's not enough to just be busy.
right.
We need to be intentional about creating that thinking culture in our workplaces.
Yes, and that means carving out time for reflection, approaching meetings strategically and actively developing our critical thinking skills.
Working smarter, not just harder. It's about moving from autopilot to a more mindful and effective way of working.
Feta's insights have given us a lot to think about today.
They certainly have. So as you go back to your own work, I encourage you to ask yourself, how can I create more space for deep thinking? What assumptions can I challenge?
Yeah.
And what tools can I use to become a more critical thinker?
The power to transform your work and your organization lies within your own mind. Embrace the challenge of thinking and see what's possible.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into the thinking crisis. Until next time, keep those minds engaged and keep diving deeper.
If you like what we do, please like and subscribe to our channel. This is all for today. See you in the next episode.